Good morning, everyone. This is day 2 of the outcome of the Bandaid. Say good morning to our Gooby. This is one of the 4 tabbies that we rescued here in Washington. Had a couple interesting realizations yesterday when I was going through the first day of being aware of this choice that I made in regards to the Bandaid. Immediately after the podcast, the first thing I thought about with the podcast, thanks, Goob. The first thing I thought about the podcast that really struck me funny was my hair and how I didn't sit there and think about how exposed I was or how open I was or how I wanted to share things with people. The first thing I thought about was my hair and how it was just like doing this whole thing. And it's amazing the things that we focus on to take us out of the moment and when we've done something different, and how we still have to feel negative sometimes, and how we have other areas that show us that we have more work to do. And I don't want to call it work because it's not work. It's just more of the journey, and that word gets used a lot, but that's, I guess, the one I'll use at the moment. So the first thing I realized after I'd done that expose was the feeling of, well, where do we go from here and what happens? And I decided that what I was going to do is just do exactly what I said in the video and just take it moment by moment and deal with what comes in the beginning. And so there were a couple of realizations that I made. And the first one was I was running my fingers over my pants. And I never realized that I used to do that a lot. And I still do. And it's a method of detection. And I use it so that I can feel whether or not my fingers have any dry skin, because dry skin for me is the trigger. If there is a small piece of dry skin that I feel, automatically there's this sense of pleasure that comes in my whole body in anticipation of what it will feel like to pull that off. My boys know, if you ask them, one of the biggest thrills that I had was when they were sunburned. And I know it sounds terrible as a parent that they're very excited when their kids get sunburned, but for me it was the peeling off of the skin. I've had a fascination with skin and how many layers it has, and not from a scientific point of view, but more for an entertainment point of view, and how it gave me pleasure to pull off these layers of skin. What I found, it was very interesting, and I've been going through this process on where I am in the actual story of this nail picking pleasure. And there's an actual line of pleasure, and I never realized that before until I was in this concept of picking. And it came to me when I was doing a study about my name. My name is Jacqueline. I've hated my name ever since I was little. I never liked it. I wanted to call myself Samantha when I was little, and I bet you it was because of the Green Eggs and Ham book that I grew up with. It was like Sam I Am, and I thought Sam was a really cool name, and I didn't piece it together until a couple months ago that's why I liked the name. And the reason I hated the name Jacqueline was because of where it came from. If you look at what it came from the word Jacques, which is French for Jacob. And in the Bible, Jacob is pretty prominent figure. He's actually considered a patriarch. He's Abraham's grandson, for people that are not familiar with the Bible stories. I wasn't named Jacqueline, as I found out from my mom, from anything to do with the biblical story. It was because there was this beautiful nurse that she had in the hospital when I was being born that really resonated with the kind of woman she wanted me to be. And what a tremendous legacy. And I thought it was fantastic. But did I take that from her? No, I didn't even know it until that again in the last, 3 months or so, that I found out that my name actually meant something positive, not negative. And I carried around this terrible, terrible feeling of my name because it means supplanter or liar. And why would you name that kid your kid that in the first place? But again, she didn't look at the meaning of the word. She actually just looked at what it meant and who it resonated when she saw who this Jacqueline woman was. In the story of the Bible, Jacob was the second born of a set of twins, and his brother Esau was the older one. And in those times, there was a very special event and rite of passage called the birthright, and the firstborn would get the birthright, and there was this special blessing, and how it was a very exciting thing and thing to look forward to. Well, Jacob decided that he would take things into his own hands and his brother was very hairy. He was a hairy man. So he discussed, with his mother's help, by the way, decided that they were worried that Jacob was supposed to be the leader and they wanted to usurp the whole birthright blessing that Esau was supposed to have. And so he goes under disguise and he puts on goat skin. I don't know how his dad would really fall for that, but he was, according to the story, he had failing eyesight. So he felt around because he had this idea that it really wasn't Esau, that it was an imposter, but he went through with the birthright and gave it to Jacob, and Jacob got his birthright by deception. And I was just mortified that I would get named after someone like that. And anytime I heard the name, especially Jackie, anybody who knows me would know even more about the picking, would know that I've hated the name Jackie forever. And I actually changed my name to Jacqueline. I went by Jacqueline for 0 to 20 years. I went by Jackie because that's my mom. She called me that, and my family calls me that. And then from 20 to 40, I went by Jacqueline because I was so sick and tired of Jackie. But it didn't matter because as soon as I introduced myself as Jacqueline, they shortened it to Jackie anyway. So that was an exercise in futility. And then the third thing, at the age of 40, I decided to change my name to Jax, and this is here I am. And it didn't dawn on me until about 6 months ago that I was stuck in only one small portion of the Jacob story. If you read further on in the chapter, he becomes this great patriarch. His sons are the 12 tribes of Israel, like the Levites took care of the temple. The story of the Joseph of many colors, that was one of Jacob's sons. And it didn't even dawn on me to go further in the story that I was actually named after someone super great, but they decided to take that one small mistake, that one small scar, I guess, of their life and choice, and name him for the rest of his life after that mistake. And I realized, but he didn't only live on that mistake. It's not like he died after that mistake. He actually became someone great afterwards. So when it came to the picking, I realized that the pleasure portion of it and the whole storyline of what was going on, the pleasure portion of it in the beginning, where I'm so fascinated with the dry skin, and I think it's such an awesome thing to feel, and I love, even now, as you can tell while I'm talking to you, I'm playing with my fingers, because that's actually a scoping mission to see where the uneven pieces of skin are, because if they are, then I automatically zone in and attack. And I realized that small modicum of pleasure that I got from that finding of the skin and peeling it off in the whole storyline of the picking is only a small portion, and it's like my name in reverse. Instead of looking at the whole storyline of where it takes me, I only focus on the one part that makes me feel good, but realizing that it's only one small part, because as you saw yesterday with my emotional, I wouldn't call it outburst because that's kind of a negative way of looking at it, but emotional expression of my feelings of the shame of this, it doesn't feel good. The remainder of the story, the remainder of the storyline with my picking is not good, not a feel-good position for me at all. So that was the first thing I realized, that I was taking the whole storyline and I was picking one small portion of it and thinking that it brought me pleasure, and it did, and it does. And realizing that was only a small portion of the storyline, and the consequences and the ramifications and the belief profiles and the feelings of myself and the self-deprecation and the self-hatred and the being caught in a toxic pattern, I never even thought about those kind of things. I just focused on that one small part that felt good, because the rest of it felt bad, not realizing that out of a scale of 1 to 10, one portion of it felt good and 9 portions of it felt bad. And so that was a very interesting realization. Did I come to any conclusions about that, on how to change it? Well, in my mind, I started to realize that there were other areas in my life that I needed to focus on what I wanted. And that those 9 areas, how do I put this to you? Those 9 areas were not contributing to the happiness and the well-being that I wanted. Those 9 areas were actually being part of a cancerous thought process and a cancerous pattern that was just eating away at me inside and was keeping me from the dreams that I wanted. And so when I was dealing with it yesterday, there were a couple times that I did actually still pick my fingers. And there were a couple times that I had to actually consciously stop picking my fingers. So in regards to the theory that it would be cold turkey, well, I guess if you could consider it, I don't know, it would be considered cold turkey. No, for all or nothing. It didn't happen cold turkey for me. I had to sit there and think about it all day, because there were times that I realized that there was a correlation to when I was expressing negative feelings about myself, I actually would pick. So there is a outward manifestation of what I'm actually feeling inside. So I've thought about that before, that it meant, well, this is great, so what? Obviously, it's a coping mechanism. Obviously, it's a stress reliever. You hear all those things before. But yesterday when I was talking about how it's the outcome of what the outcome I wanted, and how I'm really trying to change my vibration, because if we create our realities by our vibrations, then and I've been asking the universe, would like to be aware of the vibrations that create the crap in my life. I just don't. There are certain aspects of my life that I don't like. I just don't, and I don't want. But yet they still keep reoccurring all the time, all the time, all the time. So I've asked the universe to help me be aware of those feelings so that I can tweak them and adjust them to create a different reality. Well, I was given that gift. Here, I've been sitting there thinking with all this self-sabotage and self-hatred and just loathing at myself about this, when I was actually given a gift. And the gift is that whenever my thought processes are my thoughts are vibrating something that I don't want, I pick. I don't pick when I'm happy. I don't ever pick like when I'm sitting there excited about something, that something good's going to happen. The only time I pick is when I have this feeling within myself of uncertainty, whenever I'm insecure about myself or scared I don't know if I'm going to know what's the right thing to say or do, or where I feel like I'm in a position where I'm going to get something that I don't want. That's when I pick. So here, this thing that has been cursing me this whole time has actually been a gift to me to show me that if I want to stop the generation of the crappy situations in my life right at the beginning of the thought, I have a physical manifestation of when my thoughts stink. And my fingers are actually are my indicator. So whenever I went to pick, I made that realization. Another thing I realized yesterday, there were three. The third thing I realized yesterday was how I put it. My fingers throb. I don't know if you realize that it's not only an aesthetic issue, but it's actual physical issue. There are times that I have not been able to use my hands and my fingers without excessive amounts of pain. And I don't really have any other pain in my body. I'm quite blessed that way that I don't have that. But I've inflicted pain on my own with my fingers. There are times when I can't pick up a pen very well. I type at work, and the whole time my finger is throbbing, and it's reminding me all the time, you're a loser, Jax. Look at how you can't stop this thing that's going on in your life. And oh my gosh, when are you ever going to get over this? And oh, you need to stop it, and you need to get new stuff and buy new stuff and create new patterns and try again and it would just like hammer, 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 hammer on how I've lost the battle with my fingers. And I realized that the pain was, I guess, another indicator for me to see on how my thoughts stink. That I never made a correlation before of how I've been, first of all, the shame of how ugly they worked. I could like put a glove on, I could put Band-Aids on. If you're Band-Aids, people think you cut your finger all the time. Oh, I just cut myself cutting some stuff. Or it's automatic, it's a nice cover-up. People don't question you or ask any questions if you have a Band-Aid on your finger. But if your finger is throbbing and you use it all the time, sure, you could get pain medication, but I'm not a medication person. That wouldn't work. Or you could try and tune it out, which I have on some occasions. But There have been many times when my kids would grab my hand or want to grab my finger just to touch me or whatever, and I'd have to recoil in pain because it hurts so bad because I'd ripped my fingers down to the point where they were just raw, as if like I took a knife and cut them out. So at the end of day one, I have an interesting piece about myself. I'm just sitting in the moment, realizing that I don't have a desire to pick as much as I used to, which is great. I still look at my fingers, and I'm trying to look at them with gratitude, for they bore all of my, not all, but they were my saving grace when I was going through a lot of this negative thinking that I've had, and negative ideas and things that have really poisoned my mind. And today, so I look at them in gratitude and thankfulness that they were able to still be there, because you know what? Skin is a renewable resource, and I've done it many times before where I just let my skin grow back and there'll be no permanent damage. Well, and even if there is, that's part of the journey, that's part of the scarring. And I can look at those like the mountains of the earth. They're supposed to be an original scar of what happened, that I can look at them with beauty and awe and thankfulness. Have a great day, everyone. Talk to you tomorrow.